Before we start, a quick note about what this channel is and what it isn't. This isn't a recap channel, and it's not a highlight reel. We're here for the parts of Panem that happen after the cameras turn away, the systems behind the games, the contracts hidden inside victory, the lives that keep unfolding long after the anthem ends. Each video on this channel is built to slow things down, to follow the logic the Capitol relies on, the details it hopes you won't connect, and the people who live with the consequences year after year. If that's the kind of Hunger Games analysis you're looking for, you're in the right place. Subscribing just means you'll keep a seat here when we move on to the next story. Now, let's start where Panem always wants you to stop paying attention. You picture Katniss in the arena. Bow drawn, arrow aimed. That image is so strong, it almost feels like the whole reason she survives. But at face value, the bow is a distraction. It's not her real weapon, it's the prop the Capitol wants you to focus on, so you miss the thing that actually made a starving girl from District 12 more dangerous than kids raised to kill. So here's the real question. If every tribute gets weapons and training, why does the girl who trades squirrels for bread outplay careers who have been rehearsing the games since childhood? They have the muscle, the armor, the confidence, the promise of glory. She has a second-hand bow, a shaky dress rehearsal with flames, and a district that barely remembers victors exist. So what's the difference? We're used to asking, how did she win? Wrong angle. The better question is, what did Katniss carry into the arena that the careers never could? Before the games even started, because the answer isn't in the cornucopia, it's in the years before the reaping, in the woods beyond the fence, in every morning she wakes up wondering if Prim will eat that day. Back then, while the careers are sparring in polished training halls, Katniss is slipping under a broken fence, breaking Capitol law before breakfast. She's been hunting since she was 11, reading tracks in the mud, listening for the wrong snap of a twig, learning which plants feed you and which ones kill you. The arena throws mutts and traps at her, and she treats it as another day in the seam with slightly worse customer service. Any tribute will tell you the games are supposed to feel alien. That's the point. New terrain, new rules, new fear. But for Katniss, the arena is disturbingly familiar. Trees, silence, empty stomach, the constant sense that someone is watching and you can't afford a mistake. That part matters because it means she's not learning how to survive from scratch. She's returning to a system she already understands. There is a lot to uncover here. The Capitol designs the arena to break people. Starvation, isolation, spectacle. Yet those are the exact conditions that built Katniss in the first place. Her father's death, her mother's collapse, the way she shuts down emotion to keep her family alive. That emotional armor is already in place long before Caesar Flickerman ever says her name. So why does that give her an edge? Because the careers train for combat, Katniss trains for consequence. They know how to swing a sword. She knows how to weigh a risk when your sister's life hangs on the outcome. The Capitol thinks it's throwing her into chaos. She walks into a system whose rules, hunger, fear, surveillance, she's been negotiating her entire life. This is where we talk about the Capitol's biggest mistake. They build an arena meant to crush a district girl and accidentally recreate her home field. In the next section, we're going to cover how that home field disadvantage turns into the most subversive advantage any tribute ever had. Why Katniss's victory wasn't a miracle, and why that matters. She doesn't just survive the arena. She exposes it. At face value, Katniss's win gets told as this miraculous fluke. The starving girl from the worst district who somehow outshoots the careers, outwits the game makers, and walks away with a crown she never wanted. That's the comforting version. The underdog story the Capitol can almost live with. But here's the real question. If it was all luck, why does everything start to fall apart only once she wins? We're used to thinking of Katniss as the system's exception, the one tribute who slipped through the cracks. There is a lot to uncover here, because the reality is almost the opposite. In a lot of ways, she is the Capitol's own perfect tribute. Photogenic, young, fiercely devoted to her sister, already used to being watched, already trained by hunger and fear to perform for survival. The games don't create those traits, they harvest them. So why does District 12 finally get a victor now, after decades of sending kids to die? Why not with any of the dozens of desperate, hungry tributes before her? Why does this particular girl become a symbol when past victors fade into Capitol parties and morphling addictions? And why does the Capitol lose control specifically with her when they've had 74 years of practice turning trauma into propaganda? Any victor will tell you the games don't end when you win. Victory is not an exit, it's an enrollment. Victor's Village, the train, the stylists, the never-ending interviews, this is where we talk about the second arena. The psychological one. Katniss doesn't just beat 23 tributes, she wins herself into a lifetime contract as the Capitol's favorite weapon against her own district. That part matters because her so-called secret advantage doesn't just explain how she survives the trees and mutts, it explains why the post-game system can't contain her. The same skills that kept her alive in the seam, reading people, spotting traps, deciding who to trust when the wrong choice means starvation, translate perfectly into the Capitol's media maze. Snow needs a victor who can sell hope on command. He accidentally crowns someone who understands the difference between real hope and staged promise. Why does she lean into the star-crossed lovers act with Peter? Because Haymitch has already told her the games are about sponsors, not swords. Why does she threaten the berry stunt instead of going down fighting? Because years of illegal hunting have taught her where the fence is real and where it's just for show. She's been testing the Capitol's boundaries since she first slipped under that hole in the wire. And that's the bigger reason her victory isn't a miracle. It's a case study in how oppressive systems train their own destroyers. The Capitol teaches the districts to scrape, scheme, and survive under impossible odds. Then it's shocked when those survival skills become political weapons on live television. To really see that process, we have to rewind. Before the reaping, before the fire dress, back to the seam, the mine explosion, and the quiet illegal hours in the woods, where a girl was already learning how to beat the games long before her name was ever pulled. Our lens today. Katniss as the Capitol's unintentional creation. So, here's the twist most people miss. When Katniss steps onto that train for the 74th Hunger Games, she is already more prepared than most career tributes. Not because she's been training with swords since childhood, but because of the brutal, ordinary life the capital forced on her district. At face value, she's the underfed girl from 12. In practice, she's the capital's own unintended end product. This is where we talk about the 3 pillars that secretly define her advantage: survival competence, emotional armor, and performance instinct. If you keep those 3 in your head, the entire arena suddenly replays in a different genre. It stops being a story about a lucky underdog and becomes a case study in what long-term oppression actually manufactures. Start with survival competence. Katniss has been breaking capital law since she was 11, slipping under fences, dodging peacekeepers, trading meat in the hob. That's field training. Years of archery, trapping, tracking, and reading weather patterns mean the arena feels eerily familiar. When the careers are swinging swords at dummies in the training center, she's at the fire starting station and the edible plants table because she already understands the real question. In a controlled environment the capital can twist at any second. What keeps you alive isn't flashy combat. It's not dying of thirst. Then there's emotional armor. Her father's death, the mine explosion, a mother who mentally checks out, forcing a 12-year-old to become head of household. That part matters because it builds a specific psychology: hyper-responsibility, detachment, and a refusal to hope for herself. She can shut down fear on command. She can make cold calculations that a capital-raised viewer would find horrifying, but to her are just Tuesday in the seam. When she walks away from the cornucopia bloodbath, when she instantly prioritizes water over weapons, that's not instinct coming out of nowhere. That's years of choosing between her own hunger and Prim's. Third pillar, performance instinct. And this is the one the capital accidentally tutors her in. To keep her family fed, Katniss has to read people, Greasy Say, Cray, the black market traders, and adjust. Smile here, stay silent there. Never show your full hand. By the time she meets Effie and Caesar Flickerman, she already understands the relationship between pleasing an audience and surviving. Haymitch just gives it language. The games are about sponsors. She turns that into the girl on fire, the star-crossed lover, the grieving ally. She's not just surviving the arena, she's weaponizing how the capital sees her. So, here's the real question. If the capital designs the conditions that create someone like Katniss, is it really choosing victims in the reaping, or is it accidentally selecting the people it has already hardened into weapons? There is a lot to uncover here, because once you put on this lens, every beat changes. Rue isn't just a sweet friend. She extends Katniss's survival network into the trees. Peter isn't just in love. He's a co-performer who understands narrative. Haymitch isn't just drunk. He's directing a live show for sponsors. In the next section, we're going to cover how those connections turned Katniss's hidden edge into an open threat the capital can't control. What we're unpacking from the seam to the star-crossed lovers. So now that we've seen how Katniss's relationships turn into open defiance, we should zoom out and ask, where did that edge actually start? Because at face value, she's the underfed girl from the worst district, standing next to kids who trained their whole lives with swords. Here's the real question. Why does the arena end up feeling more like her home turf than theirs? This is where we talk about structure. First, we're going to cover the Seam as her real training ground. Before the games, before sponsors, before anyone in the capital knew her name, 11-year-old Katniss is already sneaking under fences, dodging peacekeepers, and feeding a family with illegal game. The woods outside District 12 are basically a low-budget arena. Unpredictable weather, scarce food, and a constant threat of punishment. That part matters because it turns every rabbit she brings home into a rehearsal for later. From there, we move into her head. Not the romantic triangle, but the trauma-hardened mindset that lets her shut down panic and make brutal choices. Her father's death, her mother's collapse, Prim's fear of the reaping. Those aren't just sad backstory beats. They're the reason she can sleep in trees, ignore pain, and treat the games as a problem to be solved rather than a stage to perform on. We're going to cover how that emotional detachment is both a shield and a weapon, and why the films sometimes sand that edge down to make her more conventionally sympathetic. Then we flip the camera toward the capital. Katniss acts allergic to performance, but she reads an audience frighteningly fast, from shooting the apple out of the game maker's pig's mouth to the spinning dress. She's constantly learning what the capital wants and then twisting it. We'll break down how she decodes their psychology, hope, romance, spectacle, and turns the star-crossed lovers act into armor. And we'll contrast book versus movie here, because the novels make it much clearer how calculated her supposed awkwardness really is. After that, we widen the frame to her hidden support network. Ruin the trees, Peter on the interview's couch, Haymitch in the control room, and the invisible hands of sponsors. The important thing here is the relationship between those helpers and her core skills. We're not going to treat them as magical plot armor that saves an unprepared girl. We're going to cover how they extend the advantage she already has. More eyes, more angles, more ways to weaponize her existing survival instincts. And then, the experiment. What if you dropped a career into Katniss's life at 11? Could they survive Tesserae, the mines, and years of semi-starvation hunts without a training center or cheering section? Later, we'll run that thought experiment, then flip it again and imagine the arena through a career's eyes versus Katniss's. Who really has the edge when the games stop being a sport and start looking like her childhood? By the end, you'll see why the capital never stood a chance and how the adaptations quietly hide just how prepared she was. Welcome to the arena behind the arena. So before we drop Katniss into the arena, we need to talk about the arena she was already surviving in. This channel is basically the Victor's Village of Hunger Games analysis. We don't just rewatch the games and rank who had the coolest kill shot. We ask why the capital built things the way it did, how that shapes every tribute's chances, and what it really means when someone walks out a victor. If you're new here and you enjoy pulling apart Panem's machinery, Snow's speeches, Haymitch's strategies, the way District 12 quietly resists, this is where we talk about all of that. We're going to cover character psychology, the political mechanics behind the arena, and the tiny lore details that the films skim over but the books bury in plain sight. At face value, it's a story about kids in an arena. Underneath, it's about a system trying to control hope. For those of you who've been here for a while, you know we've already dug into how Victor's Village turns survival into spectacle, how the capital uses reward and punishment to manage entire districts, and why Snow believes a carefully rationed promise of hope is more powerful than fear alone. This episode is building directly on that. We're just shifting the camera from the mansions on the hill to the girl in the woods below it. But if this is your first video, you're not lost. You don't need a full tour of every quarter quell to follow this. Think of the channel as an ongoing games commentary. Each breakdown stands on its own, but together they show the long relationship between Katniss, the arena, and the capital watching from above. And you're not watching alone. The community here is basically a nerdy victor's village without the surveillance cameras. We're the people who pause on a single shot of District 12's fence and ask, wait, who decided where that goes? And what does that tell us about control? We don't just accept that Katniss is good with a bow. We trace how years of illegal hunting, Tesserae trauma function as unintentional training. Here's the real question. What kind of person do you become when your first arena is starvation, not a cornucopia? That part matters because it reframes everything we think we know about careers, odds, and what prepared really means. Pattern interrupt for you. Forget the training center for a second. Forget the score out of 12. We're going back to the seam, to an 11-year-old girl slipping under a fence that's supposed to be electrified, betting her life that the capital isn't paying attention today. Next, we'll step into those woods and watch how every rabbit snare, every risk calculation, every moment she chooses numbness over panic is quietly building the only kind of training the games can't manufacture. The seam. Katniss's first arena. You step through that fence with her and realize something. For Katniss, the first arena wasn't the training center or the cornucopia. It was the seam. District 12's poorest quarter is already a controlled environment. Scarcity, as far as you can see, coal dust in your lungs, constant hunger humming under every decision, peacekeepers on the edges, not to protect you, but to protect the capital's property. At face value, it's just a mining neighborhood. But here's the real question. What do you call a place where missing a rabbit means your family starves, and getting caught means a public whipping? That sounds a lot like the games. Back then, before her name is ever pulled, Katniss is already waking up every morning to a choice the careers never face: risk or starvation. She's 11, slipping under a supposedly electrified fence, betting her life that the capital is too lazy to keep the power on. That part matters, because it's not a one-time act of bravery, it's repetition. It's years of daily calibration. How far can I push? How quiet do I have to be? How many berries can I take before someone notices? We're going to cover the bow and arrows, but the real training starts even earlier. Her father teaches her to read the woods the way other children read books, which plants heal, which ones kill, where the water will pool after rain. When he dies, the games don't recruit her. Grief does. She picks up his bow because there is no other option. Every missed shot has a cost. No meat means no trade at the hob, no bread from Peter's bakery, no oil, no thread. Failure is not embarrassment. Failure is death on a delay. So when she steps into the arena and immediately starts scanning for water, that's not a survival lesson she learned in a capital slideshow. That's Tuesday in the seam, identifying edible plants. She's been doing that since before she could legally be reaped, moving silently, using trees and elevation to disappear, sleeping in branches to avoid ground-level threats. Those are the exact behaviors she uses in District 12's woods long before she ever sees a tracker-jacker. And then there's the law breaking itself. Crossing that fence is a crime. Trading at the Hob is a crime. Katniss grows up running a one-girl black market operation under permanent surveillance. She learns to clock peacekeeper rotations to keep her expression neutral to hide her real skills during public moments. Sound familiar when she sandbags her performance in the training center, then unleashes that arrow at the game maker's roast pig? This is where we talk about risk assessment as muscle memory. Katniss is comfortable in spaces that are technically forbidden, but practically necessary. The arena is just a more polished version of that same contradiction. Don't step off the path, but also, if you don't, you die. The reason she can improvise alliances, vanish from cameras, and weaponize the terrain is because she's been doing a low-budget version of that game since childhood. So here's the real question. If the arena is supposed to be an artificial hell, what happens when the Capitol accidentally rebuilds the only place she's ever felt competent and in control? And more importantly, what happens when she realizes it? Because once that clicks for Katniss, the games stop being a death sentence. They become familiar ground, and in the next part, we'll see how the Capitol's own cameras turn that familiarity into something much more dangerous than a single girl with a bow. Hunger as training. Why survival beat combat? So when Katniss steps into the training center, you'd expect her to sprint straight for the weapons racks. Right? Swords, spears, axes, the whole career fantasy package. She doesn't. While the career tributes are essentially doing a live infomercial for murder, throwing spears, weightlifting, showing off form, Katniss drifts toward fire building, shelter construction knots, and plant identification. At face value, it almost reads as insecurity. She's from District 12, she's outmatched, so she hides in the easy stations. But here's the real question. Is that actually fear, or is that experience talking? Katniss has something the careers don't. Years of real starvation and real cold. She's watched people in the scene waste away without a single sword being drawn. She knows the reason most people die isn't a dramatic duel. It's exposure, dehydration, infection, the slow grind of a system that doesn't care if you make it through winter. There is a lot to uncover here because the arena is basically that system with better cameras. So when Haymitch tells them, "Don't go near the cornucopia," Katniss doesn't argue. She's already done this math. The bloodbath is flashy, it looks powerful, it promises instant control of the field. But to her, charging that pile of gear is the move of someone who thinks the games are a single battle. She understands attrition. You don't win by being the first one to grab a sword. You win by being the last one who can still stand up. That part matters because it reframes one of her most criticized choices. She runs from the cornucopia, not because she's a coward, but because she knows what a real fight for survival looks like, and it doesn't start in the middle of a killing frenzy with 50 cameras pointed at you. Watch what she does instead. She spends her first hours securing water, not kills. She climbs for high ground, sleeping in trees where mutts and careers can't easily reach her. She uses camouflage, mud, foliage, distance, to vanish from the board while the careers sprint around the arena burning calories and confidence. Every arrow she doesn't shoot is food she doesn't have to chase. Every fight she avoids is an infection she never risks. Meanwhile, the careers are doing what the Capitol trained them to do: perform dominance. Hunt loudly, claim territory, show the districts what power looks like. Katniss is doing what District 12 trained her to do: stay unnoticed, stay alive, and let hunger do half the work for you. So here's the question the games accidentally ask through her. If this is supposed to be a fight, why does the tribute who treats it as a survival marathon come out on top? And what happens when the Capitol realizes their battle royale is being quietly rewritten into a slow grinding war of endurance they can't fully script? Because once you see that, her bow stops being her main weapon. Her entire life does. Forged by loss, trauma as a survival algorithm. So when we say her entire life is the weapon, we're not being poetic. It starts in a mine shaft. Katniss's real arena begins the day the mine explodes and her father doesn't come home. 1 second, she has a singing, laughing parent who teaches her snares and songs in the woods. The next, there's just coal dust, a silent kitchen, and a mother who mentally disappears. Back then, the games are something on a screen. Now, survival is something in her pantry, or not in it. Here's the real question: what does that do to a 12-year-old brain when your mother is sitting at the table, staring at nothing, and your little sister is hungry? You don't get the luxury of a breakdown. You get a bow. You get the fence. You get the hob. Katniss is forced into a caretaker role the Capitol would never design for a child, but the district quietly demands from her anyway. This is where we talk about trauma as an algorithm. Her father's death plus her mother's collapse equals a new operating system: hyper-responsibility. She learns that if she hesitates, someone starves. If she panics, someone dies. So her brain starts prioritizing tasks over feelings, risk calculations over emotional processing. That part matters because it's literally the rulebook of the games, installed years before she ever steps on a tribute train. At face value, the arena is about combat. Swords, spears, mutts. But watch what she actually does. When Rue dies in her arms, Katniss is devastated, but she doesn't shut down the way her mother did. She compartmentalizes. She sings, she honors Rue with flowers, and then she moves. She finds water, she reassesses allies, she keeps going. That's not coldness. That's a survival algorithm refined in District 12's seam. We're going to cover alliances more later, but it's worth flagging how she treats them here. She bonds with Rue, she works with Peter, she even cooperates with Haymitch, but there's always a quiet distance, a mistrust of full intimacy. Why? Because the last time she fully trusted someone to keep her safe, they vanished into a mine and smoke. The next time, they vanished into depression. Emotional detachment becomes her default setting. Ironically, that's exactly what protects her from the Capitol's favorite weapon: emotional manipulation. The games are engineered as a spectacle-driven panic machine. You're supposed to fall in love on camera, rage on cue, beg for sponsors. Katniss can perform what Haymitch needs her to perform, but there's always that internal firewall. She never fully believes the promise that the arena's relationships are real or permanent. And that distance is why she doesn't break when the star-crossed lover's storyline turns lethal, or when the rule change is revoked. She's hurt, she's furious, but a part of her always knew the Capitol's mercy was a rigged offer. So she does the one thing her childhood trained her for. She makes the coldest possible decision under pressure and turns the nightlock into a weapon. But here's the twist. Armor that strong doesn't come off easily. What happens when the games end and that same emotional detachment is the only thing standing between her and the role the districts start writing for her? The mockingjay, the symbol, the promise of hope she never agreed to be. Because surviving the arena is one thing, surviving being everyone's victor is something else. The girl who watches. Katniss's predator-level awareness. So when the districts start trying to turn Katniss into a promise, into this clean symbol of hope, she reacts in a very specific way. She watches. This is where we talk about her real predator skill. She's not just good with a bow, she's terrifyingly good at noticing everything. Hunting in the scene trains you in a kind of attention most people never develop. You're 11 years old, trespassing beyond the fence, and your family eats or starves based on whether you spot a broken twig, a faint game trail, a shift in birdsong. Katniss learns to read disturbed leaves as a map, to track how animals move through the woods, to feel when the forest has gone quiet for the wrong reason. In the arena, she just swaps deer and squirrels for tributes and mutts. Remember when she realizes someone's been near her camp because the ground cover is off by a few inches? Or how she clocks that the careers are moving as a unit long before she ever sees them. That's not sudden arena genius. That's years of slipping past peacekeepers, recognizing boot prints, and knowing exactly which branches you can step on without a sound. But here's the real question. What happens when you drop a girl who's used to reading wild organic danger into a space where the danger is manufactured on purpose? She adapts again. Katniss starts reading the arena itself as if it's a living opponent. She knows those fires driving her toward the lake aren't random. They're hands on a chessboard. She notices how the mutations don't just attack. They herd. She tracks the pattern of explosions around the cornucopia and understands the game makers are corralling tributes into confrontation. She even watches the sky as if it's another forest lair, constantly scanning for hovercrafts, for the timing of body retrievals, for sponsor gifts that drop. Or each parachute becomes feedback. Did the audience approve of that move? Did the Capitol enjoy that alliance? When Rue dies and the gift of bread arrives from District 11, Katniss isn't just moved, she's learning in real time that her choices are rewriting her relationship with the districts. And she's been rehearsing this people reading for years. She knows exactly how far she can push Gale before his anger at the Capitol boils over. She knows when her mother is about to disappear into grief again, and when a peacekeeper is in the mood to be bribed instead of brutal. So in the arena, she sizes up Peter's sincerity, Rue's quiet competence, even the cracks in the career's unity with the same survival instinct. Who's posturing for the cameras? Who's already planning betrayal? Who's actually dangerous versus theatrically dangerous? There is a lot to uncover here, because at face value, this looks purely defensive. Just a traumatized girl staying alive by noticing everything. But that part matters, because once you can read people and systems this well, there's an obvious next step. You stop just observing the games. You start performing in them on purpose. And that's where her advantage becomes something the Capitol never planned for. From hunter to performer, Katniss learns the Capitol's language. So once you stop just observing the games and start performing in them, you run into Haymitch's most annoying truth. The Hunger Games aren't really about killing. They're about selling a story. He tells Katniss and Peter this straight up. Your job is to get sponsors, food, medicine, tools. Survival doesn't go to the strongest tribute. It goes to the best investment. And at first, Katniss hates that. Why should she have to smile for the Capitol, twirl in a dress, pretend this isn't a death match? She wants to win on skill, not on charm. But here's the real question. Why is she able to adapt to that idea faster than most? The answer is that she's already been performing for an audience her whole life in District 12, just without the cameras. There is a lot to uncover here, because back home, performance is the difference between punishment and protection. She fakes calm for Prim so her sister doesn't panic when there's no food. She masks her hatred when peacekeepers walk by, keeps her eyes down, plays the obedient citizen at the reaping even as she's calculating escape routes. That part matters because it means the arena isn't the first stage she's been on. The Capitol just adds better lighting. This is where we talk about those big, flashy moments everyone remembers. The chariot entrance, the interview, the girl on fire branding. At face value, it's fashion and pyrotechnics. But look at the relationship between Cinna and Katniss. He sees that she's terrible at fake enthusiasm, so he gives her something simple. Hold hands with Peter. Wear the fire. Let the image speak for you. When the crowd roars for the flaming District 12 tributes, Katniss gets her first real data point. Playing a role changes the odds. Then Caesar Flickerman's interview pushes it further. She's terrified, awkward, not a natural performer. But when she spins in the dress and the flames flare, when she lets herself be shy, honest, a little sharp, the audience eats it up. The Capitol isn't rewarding authenticity. It's rewarding a version of authenticity that fits their story of hope and spectacle. And Katniss, who spent years reading faces to avoid danger, recognizes the pattern. So why does the star-crossed lovers act become the turning point? At first, it feels like pure humiliation, a narrative she didn't choose. Peter declares his crush on stage, and she's furious because it makes her look weak, dependent. But once they're in the arena, and Haymitch starts sending sponsor gifts only when she leans into the romance, something clicks. This isn't just embarrassing, it's leverage. She kisses Peter, plays up the tenderness in the cave, begs for his life in front of cameras she can't see. And you can feel the pivot. She's no longer just surviving the games. She's actively scripting them, using the Capitol's hunger for a love story against them. Which raises the final question for this section. At what exact moment does Katniss stop being only a tribute and start treating the Capitol itself as the real opponent she has to outperform? The hidden network, Rue, Peter, and Haymitch as force multipliers. That shift, treating the Capitol as the real opponent, doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens right as Katniss quietly plugs herself into a hidden network. At face value, it looks random. She just happens to meet Rue. She just happens to have Peter in her games. She just happens to get Haymitch as a mentor. But here's the real question. Why do those relationships lock into place so fast? And why do they work so specifically for her strengths instead of against them? This is where we talk about Rue. Rue isn't just a sweet kid from 11. She's a mirror. Small from a poor district, comfortable in the trees, speaking in songs instead of speeches. Katniss recognizes her instantly because she's basically looking at a version of Prim who grew up in a different industry. That part matters because Katniss has been training for one role her whole life: protector of Prim, of her mother, of anyone the Capitol writes off as expendable. So when Rue trusts her enough to point out the Tracker-Jacker nest, that's not luck. That's the payoff of Katniss reading another oppressed kid's body language, fear and hope in about 3 seconds. She moves the way seam hunters move. She listens the way someone does when silence can mean punishment. Their alliance is really two survivalists from forgotten districts recognizing the same enemy without ever saying the word capital. Then you plug in Peter and Haymitch, and suddenly her edge stops being one-dimensional. Katniss brings survival, Haymitch brings strategy, Peter brings performance. Together, it's a full spectrum advantage. Haymitch is the only one who really understands the games as a television product, not a battlefield. Peter instinctively knows how to turn feelings into narrative. And Katniss, who has been masking emotion to keep her family alive, can drop the mask in controlled bursts that read as raw, unfiltered truth. We're going to cover sponsor dynamics, because this is where all of that converts into something blunt and physical. Gifts. Burn cream after the fire. Broth when Peter is on the edge of death. Those aren't just random parachutes. They're votes of confidence from an audience being carefully managed by Haymitch's messages and Peter's confession and Katniss's visible conflict between fear and tenderness. Why does the Capitol reward that? Because the games promise spectacle. They need a story. And a girl who keeps risking herself for other people in an arena built for selfishness is the most compelling story they've had in decades. Her instinct to protect Prim, then Rue, then Peter, keeps her human in a system designed to strip that away. The more she protects, the more the viewers protect her. Through sponsors, it's a feedback loop the Capitol accidentally created. So here's the real question. If the games reward the best spectacle, did the Capitol design a system where the most human tribute, the one who refuses to stop caring, quietly holds the real power? And if that's true, what happens when a whole country starts rooting for humanity over the games themselves? Underdog camouflage. How being underestimated became a weapon. So, if the most human tribute quietly holds the power, how do you hide that power long enough to survive? Katniss's answer is brutal in its simplicity. You let everyone underestimate you. District 12 has been training the Capitol to do this for decades. It's the joke district. No recent victors before Haymitch, starving kids, coal dust, and Tesserae. When the cameras pan over 12's tributes, the expectation isn't threat, it's pity. At face value, that looks merciful. The Capitol gets to feel generous when a weak district occasionally scrapes by. But here's the real question. What happens when that baked-in condescension becomes camouflage? This is where we talk about the training center. You remember the careers turning the gym into their personal arena, throwing spears, lifting weights, turning every station into a highlight reel. Katniss walks into that space and immediately understands the relationship between performance and survival. So what does she do? She steps sideways. She spends time at the fire-making station, at knots, at the plants. She practices archery, sure, but not as a spectacle. She's building a profile, competent enough not to be pathetic, not impressive enough to be prioritized. There is a lot to uncover here because that part matters. The careers are watching each other. The game makers are watching the careers. Katniss is watching all of them. Holding back in public training preserves her real asset. Years of illegal hunting, tracking, and stealth from the seam. If the arena already feels a bit like home, why advertise that to the people who've only ever trained in clean, controlled gyms? Then you get the private session, arrow through the apple. On the surface, it looks impulsive, angry, almost suicidal, but look at the timing. She waits until she's literally being ignored, until the promise of even a fair assessment has been broken. Then she takes a calculated risk to demand attention on her own terms. She doesn't show off for the careers. She shocks the game makers. High score, huge buzz, but still wrapped in the narrative of angry, unstable girl from 12 inches rather than stone-cold tactician. And once she's in the arena, that early reputation pays off. The careers don't hunt her first. They recruit Peter and focus on the higher-profile threats. She slips into the trees, uses that seam training to vanish, to move silently, to live on minimal food. Being seen as weak buys her the most valuable resource in the games, time. Pattern interrupt. Now flip it. Drop a career from 1 or 2 into District 12 at age 11. No arena, no trainers, no guaranteed meals. Could they poach game under peacekeeper patrols? Read animal trails in winter? Trade on the black market without getting whipped? The reason this question matters is it shows you Katniss wasn't underqualified for the games. She was overqualified for a different arena the Capitol never respected. And that's the one that actually trained her to break theirs. So if the careers are products of official training, and Katniss is a product of systemic neglect, which one really makes the more dangerous victor? Katniss, who's really better trained? So when you stack those two origins side by side, career versus seam, who's actually better trained for the arena the Capitol built for the 74th Games? At face value, the answer is supposed to be obvious. The careers are the professionals. Katniss is the desperate volunteer from the coal district who got lucky. But here's the real question. Trained for what? This is where we talk about the career pipeline. From childhood, you're in the gym, cycling through stations under adult supervision. Swords, spears, hand to hand. You're coached on posture, on showmanship, on how to smile while you're promising to kill 23 other children. Your district throws feasts when someone volunteers. The games are glorified as sport, and killing becomes a performance metric. That part matters because the entire relationship those tributes have with violence is filtered through applause. Now jump to Katniss's training. No instructors, no safety nets, no mats on the floor. She's 11, her father is dead, her mother is catatonic, and the only curriculum is feed your family or they starve. Archery for her isn't a skill, it's a survival organ. Traps, tracking, reading animal behavior, slipping past peacekeepers, navigating the hob and black markets. Every choice carries real death on both sides, either from hunger or from the capital's laws. She's not chasing glory, she's dodging extinction. So run the hypothetical. Take Cato at 11, rip him out of his training center, and drop him in the seam with no surname advantage, no extra rations, no one impressed by his muscles. Could he barter on the edge of legality without getting caught? Could he read which peacekeepers can be bribed and which will whip you for breathing wrong? Could he walk into a market where everyone is desperate and not get stripped of everything he owns in a day? There is a lot to uncover here, because those are the exact instincts the arena quietly rewards. Remember how Katniss spends training days at the fire-making and shelter stations while the careers show off at the weapons racks. In games built around mutts, tracker-jackers, dehydration, and engineered wildfires. Who's really in the better classroom? The 74th isn't a gladiator pit. It's a hostile ecosystem with cameras. The victor isn't just the best fighter, it's the one who can adapt when the game makers flip the script, when alliances fracture, when the weather itself is a weapon. So by the time Katniss steps off that plate, she's already passed the Capitol's unintentional entrance exam. Survive systemic neglect. The careers are trained to dominate a fair fight that never actually happens. Katniss is trained to survive an unfair world that never stops trying to kill her. The Capitol thinks it's breeding predators, but it's really breeding performers. The real predators are the ones it starved. And the moment you see that, you can start asking a much more dangerous question. What happens when someone with Katniss's survival wiring learns to weaponize the performance too? When survival turns into rebellion? Katniss's tactical line crossing. So when does that survival wiring stop being self-defense and start becoming a weapon against the games themselves? Because there is a lot to uncover here. It doesn't happen with a speech or a plan. It happens with a body. Rue's body. At face value, Katniss placing flowers around Rue is the most human, private thing you can imagine in an arena built to erase humanity. She's grieving a child who reminded her of Prim. That's it. But here's the real question. What does it look like to the districts when the cameras broadcast a tribute refusing to leave a dead girl sprawled in the dirt the Capitol chose for her? Katniss isn't thinking about ratings. She's thinking about ritual, about the way death should mean something. That part matters because the Capitol's entire strategy depends on the opposite. Tributes are numbers, kill counts, mutts in better costumes. When Katniss braids Rue's hair, arranges flowers, and then gives that three-finger salute toward District 11, she accidentally invents a new genre of television the Capitol never ordered. Public mourning, and it spreads. The riot in District 11 is the arena's first real viral moment of resistance. The relationship between tribute and audience flips. Suddenly the question isn't who will win, but why are we watching children die at all? Katniss's instinct to honor the dead collides directly with the Capitol's need to dehumanize them, and the impact is bigger than any arrow she ever shoots. This is where we talk about pattern. Because none of this comes out of nowhere. Katniss has been testing fences literally her whole life, crossing the electrified border when it's off, poaching in forbidden woods, trading at the hob under peacekeepers' noses. Every day in District 12 is a quiet experiment in how far can I push before the system pushes back. The arena just gives those same habits, a camera crew and better lighting. So by the time we get to the night lockberries, she's already learned the most important rule. The Capitol cares more about the story than the statistics. Winning is a number, but her lover's suicide, that's a narrative crisis. When she puts those berries in her hand, she's not just threatening to die, she's threatening to cancel the show. No victor, no triumphant train home, no promise fulfilled to the districts, just a broken games and a broken illusion of control. And the wild part is, this is still framed as survival. She's trying to save Peter, save herself, avoid being turned into a Capitol puppet. But the method reveals her secret advantage. She understands instinctively that if she can't win by their rules, she can make those rules unwatchable. So if Katniss can survive the system and then weaponize it on live television, what exactly happens the next time the Capitol tries to run the games the old way? The Capitol's biggest miscalculation: entertainment as a training ground. So when the Capitol tries to run the games the old way, they run into a new problem. Everyone's been watching. For 74 years, the arena isn't just a killing field. It's a classroom. Every district is being force-fed a curriculum in survival, strategy, and performance, broadcast in high definition. At face value, it's punishment and entertainment. But here's the real question. What happens when you turn mass murder into must-see TV for the very people you're trying to keep powerless? You don't just terrify them, you train them. Think about the patterns you start to notice if you grow up with the games. You see which alliances work and which ones implode the second a cornucopia loot runs out. You watch who gets sponsors and ask why that tribute and not the other one from a stronger district. You notice that hugging a dying ally gets more screen time than a perfect spear throw. There is a lot to uncover here, but the core is simple. The Capitol keeps replaying the same how to win highlight reel to the people they expect to lose. Kids internalize that. Katniss internalized that. She's not just a hunter from the seam, she's a quiet analyst. Every reaping, every arena, she's absorbing data. Don't light big fires. Don't sprint for the center unless you're a career. Don't trust the tribute who smiles too easily at the cameras. She watches tributes die of dehydration next to a stream they never found and files it away. Water first, weapons second. That part matters because by the time her name is called, she's already spent a decade rehearsing the right and wrong moves in her head. And it's not just tactics, it's editing. This is where we talk about the metagame. In District 12, the broadcast is chopped up, censored, framed. You see which moments the Capitol chooses to replay, which kisses get slow motion, which acts of defiance vanish between cuts. So Katniss grows up not only fearing the arena, but studying the relationship between what really happens and what the Capitol wants people to see. That's why she can read the audience without ever having met them. She understands that if the cameras linger, it's useful. If they cut away, it's dangerous. When she volunteers for Prim, she isn't just saving her sister. She's unconsciously hitting a narrative beat she's seen work for other brave tributes. When she honors Rue with flowers, she's drawing on years of watching which deaths the Capitol sentimentalizes and which they try to rush past. Here's the pattern interrupt. The arena isn't only where tributes die, it's where the Capitol accidentally trains its future rebels. By making the games a yearly ritual, they normalize not just fear, but problem solving. Children grow up gaming out scenarios. If I were in that tree, if I had that bow, if the mutts came for me. The promise is supposed to be obedience through terror, but the side effect is a generation of amateur tacticians who instinctively ask, how would I beat this? So when Katniss finally steps into the arena, she's not starting from zero. She's stepping onto a stage she's studied her whole life, ready to use the Capitol's own script against them. The real question now is, what happens when an entire generation starts doing the same thing? Book versus movie Katniss, how adaptation hides her edge. And this is where the adaptation quietly gets in the way. If you only know Katniss from the movies, you'd think her edge is simple. Bow, arrows, vines of permanent reluctance. But here's the real question. What happens to her advantage when you strip out the one thing the films can't easily show? The inside of her head. On the page, Katniss is constantly running survival math. She's cataloguing plants, remembering which roots she and Gale dug up in the woods, which berries are safe, which water sources are suspicious. She's thinking through trap designs the way careers think through sword forms. In the first games, she's not just wandering until the plot finds her. She's calculating wind direction, fire patterns, and how far she can risk moving before nightfall. There is a lot to uncover here once you realize that half her competence is quiet, internal, and uncinematic. The films, by necessity, pivot. They visually emphasize the bow, the explosions, the sprinting through the forest. At face value, that makes sense. You can show a perfect arrow shot in 2 seconds. You can't easily show 3 pages of Katniss debating whether stagnant water will kill her. But that part matters because it shifts how you, as the audience, read her. On screen, survival can look reactive. In the book, it's deliberate, almost methodical. This is where we talk about her emotional detachment. In the text, Katniss is often cold in ways the camera doesn't fully commit to. She weighs Rue as an ally before she loves her as a friend. She thinks about Peter as a potential threat, then as a potential narrative asset, long before she admits any real feeling. The films soften that, turning internal calculation into visible empathy, because the relationship between viewer and heroine usually demands warmth. You're meant to root for her, not be unnerved by how quickly she can compartmentalize. Even the sponsor dynamics get reframed. In the movies, parachutes can feel like external saves, little miracles dropping from the sky because Haymitch worked his contacts, or because the Capitol audience suddenly felt generous. In the books, those same gifts are feedback on a performance Katniss is actively managing. She adjusts her behavior, tests what plays well, and learns the reason behind Haymitch's mantra that the games are about getting people to care. He's a coach, but she's the one reading the crowd and weaponizing their hope. So if you only watched the films, how much of her true advantage did you miss? And why does it matter that we turned a hyper-calculating survivor into a more conventionally sympathetic heroine? The answer says a lot about what kinds of victors we're comfortable celebrating, and sets up the question of how Katniss herself starts using that softened image against the Capitol. The real Mockingjay, Katniss as the system's glitch. So when you put all of that back into focus, the seam training, the emotional armor, the performance instinct, you start to see that Katniss isn't just good at the games. She's built for the system that produces them. Let's recap those 3 pillars of her edge, because there is a lot to uncover here. First, you have the seam survival training. Years of illegal hunting since age 11. Slipping under fences, reading terrain, setting traps, knowing exactly how far you can push against Capitol law without getting caught. Second, the trauma-forged control, her father's death, her mother's collapse, the way she learns to shut down panic so Prim eats that night. Third, the instinctive grasp of performance, understanding almost without language for it that adults, peacekeepers, even the Capitol respond to certain poses: stoic provider, star-crossed lover, grieving sister. At face value, each of those looks separate. One is physical, one is psychological, one is social. But here's the real question: what happens when you drop someone who has all 3 into an arena that is both murder machine and television show? You don't just get a strong tribute, you get someone who can win the games and corrupt the broadcast at the same time. This is where we talk about her secret advantage as something bigger than archery. The Pariahs can fight. They understand the rules of combat. Katniss understands the rules of narrative. She can play the role the Capitol needs: a girl in the pretty dress, a dutiful victor from a poor district, a symbol of their own promise of hope, and then, at the crucial moment, refuse the script. Think about the berries. On paper, it's a tactical move. Avoid killing Peter. On screen, it's a live hijacking of the ending the Capitol already storyboarded. That part matters because it connects her personal story to the political thesis running under the whole series. Systems of control that rely on spectacle always assume they can direct the camera. They assume tributes will chase weapons, not camera angles, food, not sponsor sympathy. But the minute you create a game where survival depends on being watched, you risk creating someone who can weaponize being watched. The Capitol doesn't just manufacture victors, it accidentally manufactures revolutionaries with media training. So Katniss becomes the Capitol's glitch. She's a tribute they thought they could use as content, another disposable body from a forgettable district, who instead uses their platform to question their legitimacy. Every time she defies an expectation, from saluting Rue's district to decorating the bodies the arena wants erased, she's inserting a virus into the feed. She turns their own promise of a fair, glorious competition into evidence that the whole relationship between Capitol and districts is rigged. And here's where we turn the lens back on you. If her real advantage is this fusion of survival and subversion, what does that change about how you read her choices? Is taking food from sponsors still just gratitude? Or is it a negotiation? Is protecting Peter purely romance? Or is it strategy inside a warped moral landscape? In a world where staying alive means feeding the spectacle, what does it even mean to be a good victor? We're going to cover how Katniss starts answering that question herself and why her answer scares everyone. Next. So what was Katniss's secret advantage? And what's yours? We've been circling this the whole time, so let's finally say it out loud. Katniss's secret advantage was never just the bow in her hands. It was the arena she'd already survived. Growing up in the seam, skirting fences, trading on the black market, reading peacekeepers' moods the way other kids read weather, that was her real training center. At face value, the games are about weapons and combat. But here's the real question. What happens when one tribute walks in already fluent in hunger, fear, and power? The capital built an artificial nightmare. Katniss came from a district where that nightmare was just Tuesday. This is where we talk about how those pieces stack. Her hunting skills meant she could actually live off the land while careers burned calories showing off. Her emotional armor, built from her father's death, her mother's collapse, years of being the adult in the room, meant she could compartmentalize in ways most tributes couldn't. And her relationships with Rue, with Peter, with Haymitch formed a quiet alliance web the capital never fully read. That part matters because it turns her from a lone survivor into the center of a network. Think about the cornucopia. Is her edge really archery, or the decision not to sprint for glory because she understands risk better than the careers? With Rue, is it tree climbing and mockingjays, or the way she recognizes another exploited district child and turns that relationship into both strategy and a political question the audience can't unsee? When Rue dies, is her advantage the bow, or the choice to perform grief as defiance, decorating a body the capital wants to disappear? And then the berries. On paper, it's a gamble. In practice, it's years of reading the capital's addiction to spectacle and understanding they won't throw away 2 star-crossed victors when they've already promised hope to every district watching. She's not just surviving the games, she's negotiating with them. So what do you think her real edge is? If you had to pick one raw survival skill, that trauma-forged emotional shell, or her instinct for performance and power, which one do you see doing the most work? At the bloodbath? At Rue's song? At the moment she lifts those nightlock to her mouth? And if you were in that arena, which of those would you actually trust to keep you alive? There is a lot to uncover here once you start asking those questions about every tribute. Peter's charisma and painting, Finnick's secrets and relationships, Johanna's weaponized rage, each of them has a quiet advantage the capital miscalculates until it's too late. Tell me whose secret advantage you want us to break down next, and why. If you enjoyed pulling the games apart at this level, looking past the arena floor to the systems, the promises, the hidden reasons a victor emerges, stick around. Subscribe, join the discussion in the comments, and help decide which tribute, which district, and which hidden edge we're going to cover in the next deep dive.